Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Timothy Lee, and I'm a mining analyst here at Red Cloud Securities. I'm very pleased to introduce NV Gold to you today, an exploration company focused on advancing its portfolio of gold projects in Nevada. For the webinar today, we have with us John Watson, Chairman and Interim CEO. John will provide an introduction to the company, including an overview of activities currently underway at the company's Triple T and Slumber projects in Nevada. After the presentation, we'll take questions live. Please send us your questions through the chat box, and we'll get through as many as we can. Before we get started, just want to mention a few disclosures for NV Gold. There may be some forward-looking statements made on this call. I would direct listeners to the cautionary note on page 2 of the NV Gold corporate presentation, and that's located on the company's website, nvgoldcorp.com. For Red Cloud Securities, Inc., I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only and should not be considered a solicitation or recommendation to purchase or sell securities. We note that this call does not take into account the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investing. Please see our most recent research located on our website for NV Gold specific disclosures. With that, I'll hand it over to you, John. Please take it away.
All right, thank you, Tim. We will start out with following on that good disclosure. For those of you who like to read these, this will give you all of the necessary disclosure, and I highly suggest that you read it very carefully, and it is on our website. So we'll start with an introduction. I'm John Watson. I am the interim CEO. I'm also the founder of the company. The company has been around since 2010 as a public company. My background is both in geology and mineral economics, and I have pretty extensive experience both in the exploration part of the business and in development and production. I have built and operated 2 open pit heap leach mines in the state of Nevada from the mid-'80s up until the early '90s. Thomas Klein, who's my VP of Exploration, has about 35 years of experience, the last 20 of which have been in Nevada, a good portion of which was with Newmont. Ron Schmitz is our Chief Financial Officer and Corporate Secretary. There's also on our board of directors, Alf Stewart, who many of you may have known, Howard Golden, a geophysicist located in Perth, extensive experience around the world. John Kerr, deep experience in Nevada as well as a consulting geologist. And Quentin Hinney is our advisor, former board member, who is the head of technical services for Crescat Capital, who's one of our largest shareholders. So let's go to the highlights first. We are focused on our high priority targets, which will go through the top 3. They're all in Nevada. Our invested management team, invested is the key word there. I personally have a very significant financial stake in the company since the very beginning. I funded the company before we went public, and I've been involved in most all of the financings that we have done subsequent to that. We have significant land packages in this world-class jurisdiction, rated number 1 in the world, as I'm sure many of you are aware. We have 2 very active projects. The Slumber target, which is, we did a press release not too long ago where we said that under 43101, our exploration target is about 450,000 ounces, which is supported by 29 drill holes. Then more recently, we have done drilling that was announced in midsummer at our Triple T project in the Humboldt range, and we'll get into that in much more detail in a couple of moments. So this is, yielding some active news flow, which will continue. Moving on, one of the things about NV Gold that sets it aside from most prospect generators and junior exploration companies is that we actually have 3 points of value, which are unusual. We have active exploration by our company. It produces news flow, it produces news results, and hopefully is in the process of producing a discovery at Triple T. So we we are very active in the field as well as active with joint ventures and leases and so forth. That's because we have a number of available projects. They can produce some current income and royalties, and it helps to lay off some of the risk that's inherent in the exploration business. Then, in support of all of that, we also have a searchable data library that we have acquired over the past 6 or 7 years, and it works efficiently to help keep our project pipeline going. We'll get into that in more detail later. Our 3 primary projects, all of which are located in northwest Nevada, Slumber, Triple T, and SWP. These are on either on trends or in areas of known mineralization, and we'll get into that. So we're looking at this pipeline I just referred to. The pipeline is how you keep generating new projects. So the ultimate objective is to find discoveries. But in order to do that, you have to assess, because it's a numbers game. So how do you keep your numbers going forward? As you can see here, we have 4 projects that are advanced. SW Pipe, Triple T, Slumber are the primaries. Discovery Bay, which is coming up, it's got a couple of drill holes in it. Root Springs and Oasis have historical work that's been done on them. And then the Gold Spot, some of you are familiar with Gold Spot Discoveries, which was very involved in Newfound Gold's discovery. They helped us take this large data accumulation that we have and to bring it into the 21st century with the digital allocation of it. And so I'll get into that late in the presentation. So let's talk about Triple T first. It's our most advanced project. In the early summer, we drilled 14 shallow RC holes, total about 720 meters. We were looking for and found shallow, structurally controlled mineralization. It's basically on a regional scale thrust fault, and the thrust fault is mineralized with quartz veining and gold mineralization. So our exploration concept was, we saw surface mineralization from some old drilling. Then we extended that both north and south with surface mapping. And the concept was that this thrust fault was outcropping and partially eroded, but it dips underneath a limestone bed, a thin limestone bed, which kept it from being eroded. And we'll go into that more in a moment. And our completion date of our drilling was in August, so the results are quite recent. The gold system has now been confirmed that it is a low-angle thrust system. We've encountered potentially economic grades. Almost all the drill holes, by the way, that we drilled in these 14 holes had potentially economic thickness and grade to them, the best of which was 4.6 meters, averaging 2.4 in hole TT9, and 9 meters of 1.4 in TT11. And we've taken surface samples on the north and south extension of this that have gone up to 11 grams in north of the drilling pattern. So we have open mineralization, both north and south. That would be a long strike. I've got an air photo of it coming up here. And one of the things that makes this particularly promising is that we are proximal to operating mining infrastructure both at Rochester and Florida Canyon, and they're both in the Humboldt range. So looking at the drill results that we just announced, you can see here we had a number of intercepts. We only had one barren hole out of 14 holes. There was one hole that was not drilled, hole number 13. I think we had a driller that was a little spooky about the number 13. At any rate, we had a lot of success in this drill program, and it really confirmed that the thrust fault is well mineralized. It's consistent over north, south, east, and west where it outcrops, and it's partially been eroded. So we started looking underneath the limestone, And so when you look at this, what you see is a light blue and a dark blue, and that's a limestone bed that sandwiches this thrust fault zone. The upper limestone is resistant to weathering, which is nice, and it has kept the thrust fault intact. What we have drilled is where the thrust fault outcropped, and you can see there's a number of drill holes that were drilled through it, including one that went through the upper limestone and was mineralized when it went through the thrust fault just below the lower boundary of the upper limestone. So there's potential as you go to the east, which is where you're looking to the north in this slide, and so the cross section is actually an east-west cross section. And you see the host lithology with potential gold mineralization is tripping off to the east. It actually goes into the valley floor. So our purpose of the next program is going to be to assess that. So let's look for a moment here. You see the star that has the 2023 drill area. And if you'll notice, there is a reddish brown kind of linear zone that goes to the north and then tips off to the northeast and further to the east. And if you follow it a little bit to the south and southwest, all of that area, which is quite long, it's over 5 kilometers long, all of that area is potentially mineralized, and there makes for large drill targets. What we have gotten centered on is this 2023 drill area is there because it outcrops. It's as I said, it's partially eroded, which gives us a lot of hope for very good drill targets, particularly the northeast right now, along that dark reddish brown linear that goes off there. We've sampled that, and the press release came out this morning actually that gets into this in much more detail. Unfortunately, it came out a little too late for us to put it into this slide presentation, so I invite you to go to the press release from this morning, and it talks about in more detail where these samples came from. These are surface samples now that are again in this outcropping zone that's partially eroded. One of the benefits of that is that it also takes us down dip, and some of these little canyons that go from the northwest to the southeast are eroded deeply enough that we can see underneath that upper limestone. And indeed, we've gotten some up to 4 grams in some of these channels that are cut through. So it's pretty exciting. So what we're going to be doing next is our next program will include an IP survey, an east-west survey that will take us a look at the deeper parts underneath this upper limestone and try and assess the target depths, which will make our drilling more efficient. And our additional step-out drilling, which will go to the north in the exposed areas and to the east where we've confirmed the directions, but we're looking for higher grades and thicker mineralization. The potential here is for some very good grades. Thrust faults are horizontal faults that grind up the rock material and produces very good porosity for mineralization to be emplaced. So that's what we're looking for. Our additional surface sampling north and south, it says currently underway. That's the initial portion of that has been completed, and that was what the press release was this morning. And we're going to continue on that. We're going to be mapping in even greater detail. So we're pursuing north-south targets, and then we're going to be using induced potential for looking at the deeper targets. Moving on to Slumber, which we've had press releases on in the past. We've been drilling out there 4 programs over the past 5 years. The drilling is still very wide spaced, and I'm sorry that we couldn't have a larger representation of that here. What you see in the block on the left-hand side is our drilling with 4 drill holes that were drilled back in the 1980s by Amax Gold that discovered Sleeper, and that we were done contemporaneously with the discovery at Sleeper. These holes that we have drilled, we have a limited size left on our exploration permit, and we'll have to go back for an enlarged permit at some point. We can drill 2 more holes with no problem. What we're trying to do here is to look underneath shallow recent sediments, if you will. These are where there's been a lot of volcanics in the area that have eroded and filled the valley floor. So it's not easy to see through this stuff. And it's in some places it's only 5 meters thick, in other places it's 50 meters thick. So, but it's more recent mineralization, so you have to, or more recent erosion, so you have to be able to see through it. Geochemistry doesn't work as well. What we've done recently is to employ more subtle technology in the form of mercury vapor analysis. Mercury is very volatile, and when you have changes in atmospheric pressure, it will some of the mercury vapors will be drawn up through surface sediments and to the surface, but you need to use extremely sensitive techniques to assess it. And we've developed some new targets from that. We have 2 drill holes that we want to test this particular technique. And what we're looking for are the higher grade structural intercepts. The mineralization here, when you look at the stuff on the right here, the rock chips in here, it's all ground up. There's mineralization in this. This stuff runs a couple of hundred parts per billion, and it is extensive and it's continuous. What we're looking for is where the grades are higher. The 450,000 ounces that we quoted in our exploration targets are a couple of hundred ppbs, which would be marginal mineralization at today's prices, but it's within the scope of at higher prices, these grades will become economic. The drilling that we have planned at Slumber will be 2 RC holes totaling about 400 meters, and it'll be a short program. It'll be reverse circulation, and given that we have a number of holes in the neighborhood that have anywhere from 50 to 100 plus meters of mineralization, consistent mineralization, we have some pretty high hopes for these holes. Okay, the third project that's high on our list is called the SW Pipe. It's about 6 kilometers southwest, hence the name SW Pipe, southwest of the pipeline mine that belongs to Nevada Gold Mines. It's operated by Barrick. It's a 10 plus million ounce deposit. So we are in a very close proximity to an extremely large mine, and there is gold outcropping at the surface of this. Let's see here. Let's get to the project that we have lined up for this is a 1 or 2 diamond drill hole program of approximately 1,000 to 1,500 meters total. The target that we're looking for there would be something in the same sort of grade range as Pipeline. At depth, it'll be an underground target, quite large. This is a multi-million ounce target. The program is an expensive one, and it's why we are not doing it ourselves all by our loans. We're hoping to bring in a joint venture partner by the first half of 2024. The halo was identified, and I'll get to that in the next slide. The halo was identified by our work. There was a shallow drilling program that was done in the 1980s, and then we have followed that up. In that area, what we're looking for is the subtle geochemical halo that indicates that there's leakage up along the vertical faults. And I think we've done a pretty good job of that. When you look at this slide, on the left, you see different colors there. Well, that's gold, stibnite, mercury, tantalum, and silver. And what it does is it points to a bullseye, which is outlined in the blue dotted line. And that bullseye is telling you that you're looking right down the core, perhaps, of a leakage up along a fault intercept. So in the right-hand side where you see this thing, it says dilational zone. This is where the faults have wrenched apart and opened up a chimney, if you will, toward the surface. And that is where our drill target is. That's our primary drill target. There's actually 2 places that we look at drilling holes there. And these will be deep holes. These will be anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 feet. So, 5, 6, 700 meters. Okay, so the 2024 outlook for NV Gold, our programs are SWP, find a joint venture partner, drill 2 deep diamond drill holes. Slumber, much smaller scope of work. We have identified a large low grade, potentially an ore body. We have higher grade targets that we've identified through this mercury vapor analysis. So we'll have 2 mid-depth RC holes. It's drill ready. We have room in our permit for these 2 holes. And then Triple T, which is probably where most of our work will be going, we have a 5-kilometer long outcropping gold system that you can pick up multi-gram samples at surface. You have outcropping quartz veins. We have good potential there for additional drilling success. And at depth, as we go to the east, as this thrust fault dips shallow down to the east toward the valley, there's great potential underneath this upper limestone that I spoke of. So the work that we just finished was 14 shallow RC holes. 13 of those actually hit anywhere from 200 ppbs up to almost 5 grams. And that work was completed. It's now looking at an IP program and another drill program. So we're pretty excited about it. This is the first stage, in my opinion, this is the first stage of discovery. So moving along, we spoke of early in the presentation our pipeline. How do we find new prospects? We have a lot of experience in-house, besides my 40-something years and Klein with over 30. We also have a lot of experience on our board of directors. So how do we put that to good use? Well, we've developed a data library, if you will, and it was hundreds of boxes of old reports that had been done by previous companies scattered all over Nevada and actually outside Nevada as well. It's difficult to do something with a big data library with that like that. How do you put it to use? Well, what we did was we did a venture with Goldspot Discoveries, and Goldspot went through and digitized all of this data. It took us over 2.5 years to do it, and fairly expensive, and was set up so that we could search this database. So now it's all digital, and we can look at it, we can analyze it. If we have someone who brings us a submittal, we can go and find out what data that we have on it, and then we can put the project together. And by the time that we go to the field, Klein or myself are already advanced in our thought process to go look in the field at what this is telling us. So it saves a lot of time and it saves a lot of money, because you're not going to reinvent the wheel every time. If you've got a data package on a property before you step into the field, you have a head start. The data that was involved in this, a lot of it was generated by Anglo Gold Ashanti. They had about a 20-year program in the western U.S., most of it in Nevada, and we have that data package. And then another 2 companies that I was able to purchase their data was from U.S. Minerals Exploration, which was very active in the 80s and 90s, and Canyon Resources, likewise, 80s and 90s. So the purpose of doing this way is that you have a much lowered acquisition cost. If you have a good prospect that's been generated by AI or by just grunt work, then you go out and you can stake it. If you stake it, you can do it with a much lower royalty cost, acquisition cost, or maybe no royalty at all. And if you have no royalty at all, you probably don't have any advanced minimum royalties. So it's a very efficient way to add projects into your project pipeline, and that way you can grow your company with it, and you can do it efficiently. Okay, so our capital structure, we have just under 89 million shares that have been issued. We have warrants and options out, and a totally fully diluted of about 114 million. Obviously, like most companies, a number of those warrants and options are underwater, some of them significantly. So our fully diluted is probably less than 114 million. We're traded on the Ventures Exchange, the QB Exchange in the US, and in Frankfurt. Our market cap right now is about 3.5 million, which is as low as it's ever been. And our 52-week high low is, I see a typo there, my apologies, it's 9 cents and 4 cents. Our cash position currently is about 300,000 Canadian. We do have a couple of institutional investors that are involved in it, Crescat, US Global, and Sprott. I personally own north of 8%. I'm probably north of 9% now. There, I haven't done the calculations off SETI today, but I've been buying stock in the market because I particularly like what we're doing and the results that we're getting. So that's my support as the interim CEO is unwavering. I've been at it a long time, and I like where we are. So the takeaways. We have a very experienced management team. We have approaching 150 years between us and between Klein and myself and the board, and all of it focused primarily in Nevada. We have a very disciplined capital allocation strategy. I've been in the business so long that I cringe if 10 pennies are not spent wisely. Capital is too hard to come by, and you really want to make it as efficient as you can. No big offices, no high salaries, just get the money in the ground. We have a large land package in this world-class jurisdiction, which we have been working on for many years. We have, as I pointed out, significant management ownership. We are doing much more portfolio management now through leases and joint ventures. We just sold one recently. So we have three areas that we can point to in value. Active exploration, which is the potentially giant payoff. And, if you make a big discovery, then your stock price goes up substantially. We have our AI and data section where we are doing a lot of analysis work now, and we have a portfolio of properties, most of which have had some exploration work done on them and have indications of mineralization. So we have good assets, good experience, and we have a good database. That's about all you can ask for in a junior company, and we're planning on making the best of it. So I will open it up to Tim and to anybody that's got questions. Please feel free.
Great. Thank you, John, for that very informative presentation. We'll now start the Q&A portion of the webinar. A reminder to everyone on the line that you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. We already do have a few questions here. First, can you tell us a little bit more about what happened with the RC drilling at the SW pipe target this year?
Excellent question. Our goal was to get an RC hole down deep. That is always a challenge. You don't know what kind of rock types you're going to get into and what sort of. We had the right equipment for sure. We had a rig that was capable of 2,500 feet. Our goal was to get to 2,000. And we got down about 1,200 feet, ran into copious amounts of water in very bad ground. We were unable to complete the hole. And it was an expensive hole. It was over 100,000 US to drill this. And we saw that to try to take it any further was going to break our pick. So we abandoned the hole, and we're looking for a joint venture partner with deeper pockets. I mean, that's about as cold as I can say it. We gave it a shot and couldn't get to our target depth.
Sure. Another question here. What was the reason for John Seberg's departure?
There are several reasons there. Primarily is, John was pretty substantially paid, and our budgets were getting pretty thin. So he he moved on because he had needs that we couldn't necessarily meet. I'm in the background. I'm cheap because I'm retired. To be boldly honest about it, it was a financial consideration, not nothing about John. John has a lot of capability, and I was sad to see him go.
All right. Another question here about the approach, and you had mentioned some things about some of the, I guess, decisions about projects, but specifically, would you consider selling off one or more of your priority projects to raise capital? For example, SW Pipe, Slumber, or Triple T?
It's possible we would sell SW Pipe. It has been discussed. Nothing is going on at the moment. Slumber, I think, probably would be more likely to be joint ventured. That one would be a very good joint venture project. Triple T, you'd have to pry it out of my cold dead fingers. I really like this project. It has potential for it to be a substantial discovery, and we're advancing it very quickly. We're beginning to understand it better, and I really like where it's going.
All right, great. One general question here. Obviously, Nevada is an area that's seen a lot of exploration over time, but you have made some new discoveries. What are you doing differently that allows you to make discoveries there?
Nevada is an interesting place. It's in what's called the Basin and Range Province, which is a crustal extension. Imagine stretch marks, if you will. When the mountain ranges that we see out there were explored, heavy exploration in Nevada started back in the 60s, and it's been well looked at since then by some very competent people. So what I like to refer to as the dumb gold that's been found. However, the valleys in between these long mountain ranges, there are wide valleys which are typically of the same order of magnitude width as the mountain ranges are. Those are dropped down by gravity extension. And as a result, those fill in with recent gravels from the erosion of the mountain ranges. And that covers everything up that's down there. Well, it's the same rocks. When you get out into these valleys, the rocks that you see in the mountain ranges on either side, those didn't just disappear. They're just dropped down anywhere from, a few tens of feet to hundreds of feet. And they're dropped down and they've been covered up by gravel. So how do you find the gold deposits that are there? Logically, if you have a gold deposit in a mountain range, there's no reason why you wouldn't have a gold deposit in the valley underneath the gravels that looks kind of like the one that's up in the mountain range. And some of them have been continuous. They go right straight down the mountain, and then they go through the range front fault and down into the valley, and there's been some nice discoveries made that way. So there is, in my opinion, there is equal potential to find as much gold as has been found and mined in the state of Nevada. There is potential for as much gold in these valleys as there ever has been found. So we get pretty excited about that. That's why we're using some of these new techniques. Geophysics isn't a new technique, but it's one that once you get sniffing around in the right places, then geophysics helps you narrow things down. Using the various different geochemical techniques where you're looking at relationships between various subtle gold, silver, arsenic, and so forth, when you start looking at ratios that are involved in that. When you're looking at structural analysis of how the valleys were pulled apart, for instance, we did a fairly significant exploration program on one of those, ultimately unsuccessful as most are. But that's how you do it. You're looking for the subtle expressions, because the easy ones, you can't walk around on these rocks on the surface anymore. You're walking on gravel, and the gravel is going to obscure things. So you've got to figure out a way to see what's under the gravel. And this mercury vapor analysis, for instance, looking at exhalations of mercury from from underneath, from the hard rocks that are underneath the valley floor gravels. One of the ways that you can see through it. So that's what we're doing. We think that the potential for that is exceptionally good, and the discoveries that'll be made from that type of looking, those discoveries will be big ones.
Great. You had mentioned during the presentation that you reported some positive surface sampling results this morning at Triple T. Can you give us a bit more insight on what you uncovered there?
Sure. In that press release, there's 4 target areas that are highlighted on that. What we did was we did more detailed mapping of the geology there, and the purpose of that is to try and connect the dots up. We had a drilling program that was in a relatively tight area, and it was very successful. And so what you're trying to do in that case is you're saying, well, okay, this is what we found, but why did we find it? What are we looking at here? What's it telling us? Well, what our drilling was telling us there is that there's a thrust fault, and you got a nice little window there at the surface, and you see this thing that is dipping off to the east at 20 or 30 degrees, and it's going right down the mountainside toward the valley. And on the positive side of that, you have a cover. You have an erosionally resistant cover of a limestone bed that's anywhere from a few tens of feet up to maybe 100 feet thick. And what that does is that keeps the mineralized zone from being eroded away. And you've got a knife edge that sticks out from underneath there, lapping up onto the east flank of the Humboldt Range. And when I showed you that picture a little while ago from air photos, that's from, 40 or 50,000 feet. When you're looking down at that, you see this brown stripe. Well, you get down on the ground there, and it's very bold alteration that runs north and south. It's got a lot of iron in it, so it outcrops nicely, and you can see it. And so when you trace that north and south, it's just where it's just peeking out from underneath the limestone that keeps it from being eroded. And it's a wonderful outcome, because it indicates that a lot of mineralization may be preserved. So you've got a preserved target. And the thrust faults are very prolific in Nevada. They have been responsible for a number of very large discoveries. So this is one that sticks out a little bit and is hidden a lot. It's going to have to take a fair about more work to get the larger scale targets identified, narrowed down, and get the bullseye on them. So we're pretty excited. This is a real opportunity.
Great.
Anytime that you can find anywhere from 4 or 5 grams up to nearly 10 grams in outcrop in the state of Nevada, you're onto something. It's pretty exciting stuff. And it's in a well-mineralized mountain range as well.
Great. Now, shifting a little bit, obviously your main focus is in Nevada, but you do have the project in Switzerland as well. What are your plans for that project?
Okay. It's a very good project. We actually have a 43-101 that we did on that several years ago, and it's published. It's on our website, and it's on SETI. It's a little complicated. The project was first identified back in the 1980s, and gold was identified in Switzerland all the way back to about 1200 AD. But the first modern work was done on it was in the 1980s. The guy that was involved in it was a dual citizenship, Swiss and Canadian. And then it was further drilled in 1991. And there were 2 drill holes that were actually drilled in 91 that both produced. They were drilled from one drill site, so they're close together. You'd expect them to have similar results, and they do. Over 100 meters of nearly a gram. and including 4 and 5 grams over mineable widths within those broader numbers. There's no chance that you do an open pit mine in Switzerland. I don't think that'd be allowable politically, but I think there is good potential for an underground mine in Switzerland. There have been some, not gold mines, but there have been other metals and so forth that have been attacked underground in Switzerland. And not to mention that they're probably the world's premier tunnelers. There's, I don't know, 20,000 kilometers of underground tunnels in Switzerland. They're great miners. The project, though, when we started working on it, we did quite a lot of surface sampling. We did soil geochemistry, and we re-logged all of the previous drilling because at that time, the core that had been done in 86 and 91 was still available. It has subsequently been donated to the Swiss government, so it is still available even now. It is. The potential there is for high grade, narrow shear zone type mineralization. Probably the best analog to it is the Kittilä mine up in northern Finland. So it's a good prospect, but it's also, we've taken it about as far as we can take it as a small company. At this point, it's the next stage in this will be some more detailed diamond drilling on it, and it's in an area will take helicopter support, but not hugely. So a lot of the equipment can be hauled in on backpack. So it's a good project, and it really needs a joint venture partner, preferably a European or Swiss joint venture partner. But it's a very promising project. There's a lot of outcrop there where you can get 10-gram samples in the surface. The highest sample that we got in outcrop was 30 grams.
Oh, great. And one more question. We did talk earlier about possibly deals on your main projects, but would you look to monetize other non-core projects in the portfolio?
We've had interest from other companies in purchasing a copy of our database. Our database is very well organized. We've invested a lot of money in it to get it into digital format and in searchable format. So it's quite valuable. And obviously we're using it to develop new projects. Well, other companies that really want to establish a beachhead in Nevada or that already have one, it would be valuable to them. So we've had some discussion with other companies about the purchase of that, or at least purchase of a copy of it.
All right. Well, I think that's all the questions we have. Maybe one kind of closer. Can you provide a bit of a summary of upcoming catalysts for NV Gold in the next 6 to 12 months?
We'll be looking at raising some money, obviously, as almost every junior company is right now, and it's a real challenge. Sometimes I think raising money is the bigger challenge than finding gold. And so that's one thing that'll be definitely on our plate. And the next programs that we'll be doing will be the IP program and additional surface sampling at Triple T. The surface sampling mapping and so forth at Triple T is that portion of it. The geophysics is probably going to have to wait for the financing, but the surface sampling and mapping is something that is relatively small financially, but can yield some very good results. So that is ongoing. That'll be the next thing you'll be hearing about.
Okay, great. Great. Well, I think that's it for the Q&A portion of the webinar. John, I would like to thank you for taking time to host this webinar with us today. And thank you, everyone on the line, for tuning in. We did have a webinar scheduled for this coming Thursday with Tempest Resources, but that's going to be rescheduled for October, so stay tuned. And have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.